G'day, welcome to Down Under Woodworks. In today's video, I'm going to be making a couple of upgrades to my homemade router table. So here's the router table which I built probably about a year ago, I think. Yeah, not quite sure, but I will leave a link to the build video for it in the description below. Now, it used to sit down that end of the table saw, and recently I rearranged the workshop slightly and I moved it to this side, and I've also got a video about that I'll link below. It's working out much better for me on this side of the table saw. So yeah, no problem with the functionality of it at all, but I do want to make just some improvements. And one of the improvements is, as you can see now, the workbench slash outfeed table extends quite a bit past the current router table. Probably, I think that gap there is probably about 6 inches. So because the walkway here is defined by that bench anyway, what I want to do is I want to extend this out further. That'll just give me a bigger base, more support for the workpiece when I'm using the router table. Also, what that'll allow me to do is bring the router just forward a little bit. Currently the mounting plate at the back, it's bolted through a bracket that I have that attaches it to the table saw. So if I ever want to take this out, I have to actually get my hand in behind there, hold the nut, undo the screw, and just a bit of a pain. These ones here just go into threaded inserts, so they're fine. So one thing, if I can bring it forward a little bit, I can use threaded inserts at the back as well, and that'll just make it so much easier to pull the router out. The other improvement I want to make is I want to add router bit storage. Now, I've thought about doing some sort of vertical slide drawer on the sides, but as you can see, I have the dust extraction on this side. And on this side, I sort of have the on-off switch and sort of a bit restricted there. So the only place really is maybe a drawer or two underneath. But as you can see, that is my current router lift. But it's time for it to go. So as part of the improvements and allowing me to get rid of that, just let me pull the router out of the router table and I'll show you what I want to do there. Yeah, the other improvement I'm going to make to this is I'm going to convert it to being adjusted through the top of the router plate, which will just make it a lot easier. With this particular model, I'm pretty lucky because it already has this piece here, which is the height adjustment. Yeah, you would normally screw that down for fine adjustment, or just press that in for bigger adjustment. And down on this section here was that little rotator with the different presets. So I've taken that off, and what that will allow me to do is I can just take that out completely. I don't have to do any modifications here, and I can just replace that with an extra long 10mm cap head screw. I did try and source one that was 6 inches long, but the only ones that I could find weren't threaded all the way. They only had thread up to about here. So I had two options: buy one of those and then cut the thread further down. The other option was I just got a shorter bolt, 10mm threaded rod, and just welded it together. And that's worked out perfect actually. So what that will do, that will come through the mounting plate, through a hole here, and straight into there. If I drop that down, you can see that little metal locating pin, there's two locating pins there. Well, that one there is in the exact center of that bolt. So that gives me my drilling point. To get the base plate off the router, I had to knock out these two spring pins, which I did with a hammer and a small piece of steel rod. I then drilled a pilot hole through the mounting plate and the base plate. I used a 15mm Forstner bit to drill a clearance hole in the mounting plate. which had to be filed out to fit the head of the screw, which was 16 millimeters. The hole in the router base plate was drilled at 10 millimeters. I had to make a small cutout in the side of the base plate to make clearance for the head of the screw. Because of the voids in the base plate casting, I needed to fill that space under the screw head so the top of it would be just below the surface of the mounting plate. The mounting plate thickness was 5 millimeters. A cut down 1/2 inch nut fit perfectly. Then it was time to put the router back together by reinstalling the spring pins. And then I attached the mounting plate and gave it a quick test run. With the router done, it was time to replace the top of the table. The top is made of 2 layers of 16mm melamine, so I first traced out the mounting plate on the underside of the top layer and used a brad point bit to get a centre mark to drill the mounting holes. I then used those marks to line up the old top and copy the cutout for the router to pass through. Then I turned the melamine over so I was looking at the top surface, and with the mounting plate in its correct orientation, I lined it up and traced it out again so I could route out the recess for the plate to sit flush in the table. I set the depth of the router bit directly off the mounting plate so it would be perfect. And then using temporary fences, I cut the outline of the recess. I deliberately haven't cut out the centre section yet because this gives the router support on both sides. With the recess now routed out, I used the jigsaw from underneath to cut out the access hole for the router. Perfect fit. Last thing to do is install the T-nuts. I added small screws for extra security. I've got the router mounted in the table, but there's an issue. The tension of the spring behind the quick release nut isn't strong enough to overcome the weight of the router combined with the tension of the plunge springs. The quick release nut has thread just on one side, and the spring pushes that thread against the screw. So what I need to do is stop this nut from being able to move back and disengage from the adjustment screw, and the way to do that would be to replace the spring with something solid. I used my verniers to measure the gap I needed to fill, and it was 12 millimeters. So I cut a piece of dowel, and with that installed behind the nut, it's in the perfect position to be always engaged with the adjustment screw thread. Okay, with the router back in the table, we can give it a test run. And as you can see, the height adjustment bolt is engaged with that thread at all times now because the nut can't slide back. And you'll be able to see that I can pull that all the way up to the very top of its travel with all that tension on those plunge springs, and that's it. So that's fantastic. Such a simple fix, and it's working great. Well, there you have it. That's 2 upgrades to the router table, which I don't think were very difficult to do, but they're going to make a huge difference to how I use it. If you've been thinking about doing a similar conversion to your own router or router table, then hopefully this video has given you a little bit of an insight and a lot of inspiration to get out and get that done. Well, thanks again for watching the video. I do really appreciate the time you guys give. Hopefully you got something out of it. And if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Comment as well if you want. It does help to get it out there in front of more people.
If you want to know what I'm up to in between videos, you can follow me on Instagram. I do post over there pretty regularly. But until the next video, you guys all have a great day.